Alrighty, g'day guys. Welcome back to Steelers Nation Australia. And today we have a special podcast. I have the privilege to talk to a good fella and we're gonna figure out his story. His name's Don. He's an author slash NFL sports historian. Done some other projects too, focusing around other sports. I think it was swimming and maybe biking. But I'll get into that when I bring Don in. I met this fella on Facebook on NFL. I think Australia or something like that. And he was asking about, anyone got any stories about, teams, stadiums, and that kind of stuff. So today we're gonna find out Don's story, but also we're gonna go into a bit of the history of the Steelers and look at like the stadium and how I see and how Steelers fans feel about Heinz Field. Like it is the overall like mecca of all places. When I've been there with 65,000 fans, it's freaking amazing. So we're going to introduce Don now, and we're going to see where this podcast takes us. So let's welcome in Don. G'day, Don. How's it going, mate? How are you?
Good, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued because obviously we don't know each other from a bar of soap. We've only been texting back and forth on emails. I'm intrigued about your story. So in a little quick like synopsis, what are you trying to? Obviously, you're an author, but what is the book that you're writing about now or focusing on the NFL? What's it overly about?
So the book is my attempt to trace the early days of the American football, the development of American football in an overview way, so that you can see a little bit of the difference between how Aussie rules developed as opposed to American football, because they're quite distinct sports nowadays, but they evolved from rugby in England. And I'll start off with a little bit about that. Then primarily the book is about the formation of the NFL in the early 1920s and a look at how the league has evolved in the last 100 years. My intent is to have a chapter on all 32 NFL teams, and I'll be covering off on things like great coaches for those teams, rivalries for those teams, great quarterbacks, running backs. There will be special players and special games mentioned in the chapters. My idea when I first contacted you, and I'm a historian, I love all that historical stuff. But I'm fully cognizant of the fact that most Australians are recent converts to the game over the last maybe 10, 20 years, and they'll want to have some current content in there, and I fully understand that. So the idea was with the stadiums, I know a lot of Aussies have gone overseas in recent years, 10 games like your good self. And it would be great to get a photograph of some of these stadiums, as many as I can of the 32, and get a bit of crowdsourcing help, with those photos and perhaps with a bit of impression of what you think of the stadium.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to explore that today too. And the one thing is though, you say 32 teams. Can we cut out the Bengals? They're not a real team.
Now I was seeing the banter back and forth and how joyous you felt after they lost that game to Kansas City a few days ago.
Oh, it warms my heart.
No, we don't cut out any teams.
I never include them in the 32. To me, there's 31. Like I dislike them so much because the last few years they had this real big ego, like a massive ego. And they haven't done anything. They've only won 10 playoff games in their history in the 55 years they've been there, or 53 years, whatever it is. They, for a long time, for like 30 odd years, they'd never won a playoff game. And now they've won, I think, 4-1. So I only joke that they shouldn't be included. But it is a really cool project you're going on. Of course, you are a historian, you are an author, which is fantastic. I've got the attention span of like a buddy goldfish. And when I start to write something down, I immediately would throw it away. I do enjoy to write too, but that's fantastic what you're trying to achieve. Talking all the sports. But let's go back a little bit. So you said you've had other works, as other books as well. What other projects have you done?
So in 2019, at the end of a 2-year project, I produced a book on the Brighton Icebergers swimming group down here in Melbourne. We're
Hmm.
a group of cold water swimmers who swim in Port Phillip Bay 12 months a year, regardless of the temperature, without wetsuits. So
Wow.
that's our claim to fame, as it were. And there are a lot of us. And just as a quick aside, there are now a lot more cold water swimmers as a result of the pandemic, because swimming pools in Victoria were closed down for months on end. And if people wanted to get their swimming fix, they had to go to the bay. So what I did with that book was compile 152 profiles of the different swimmers who swim
Wow.
the bay. And it was a terribly interesting project. You've got people who were born here. You've got lots of people who were born overseas. Exploring how they got into cold water swimming, why they do this, because most people think we're insane.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that's what that book was about. I also did a book on Australian rules football, which is called Aussie Rules Football, An Outsider's Perspective. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's given me the impetus to do the NFL book, because the AFL book had chapters on all 18 teams. It traced the evolution of the game here in Australia and has proven to be very popular with schools, public libraries, and quite a few of my friends bought it as well.
That's amazing. So, what with that aside stuff, the book stuff. What's the Don Warner story? How did you come to Australia? Obviously, you were born in Canada.
Yep.
What's the Don Warner story? And we've got to find out who's your favorite team in the NFL.
Okay. The Don Warner story is that I went to the University of Toronto in Toronto, Canada, and trained to be a school teacher. But unfortunately, the year I graduated, which was 1976, was the start of a period of about 6 years when there were far too many teachers graduating and no jobs for 95% of us. So there I was with the teaching degree and in my mid-20s, and no job. So I decided to travel to New Zealand and Australia. And I got here in 1977. And the first 2.5 years I was here, I was working as a school teacher in the Northern Territory.
Oh, all the way up top.
Yep. So I had a stint in Tennant Creek for a few months, and then 2.5 years in Darwin.
That would have been different. That would have been different from going from Canada to up north.
Absolutely. From Toronto to Tennant Creek was quite a culture shock, I can tell you.
That I haven't been up there yet. I've only been up to Queensland, down to
Yeah,
Melbourne, and mostly on the East Coast. Never been west. Never been to Perth.
yeah,
I've never been up top to Darwin. Like that is like hot and muggy. Like
yeah, yeah,
that is a difference of circumstance for sure. So then
absolutely.
you've been living in Australia for since the 1970s, right? Now you're in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But let's talk about who's your favorite team. Then we're going to get into some of the NFL stuff. We'll get your thoughts on the NFL.
So I've been a New York Giants fan since I was about 8 years of age, 6 or 8 years of age. I had an older brother who was 7 years older than me, and he was a keen New York Giants fan, New York Yankees fan in the baseball, and I just followed his lead basically. And at the time that I was growing up as a pretty young guy, around 19 late 50s, early 60s. New York had really good teams, never quite good enough to win the NFL championship, but
Hmm.
getting to the championship game 6 out of 7 years between 1958 and 63.
I've always enjoyed the New York Giants. I've always enjoyed how you guys call them the New York Football Giants. I've always liked
Yep.
that little football tag or that little slang of like, yeah, we're the New York Football Giants. I've always liked that idea. That it kind of also encapsulates America too. Like they're pretty a hard nosed team. The logo's pretty cool. Like obviously
Yep.
I'm not a fan of the Giants. I'm a fan of the Steelers. But was there any like I guess any rivalry with like the New York Jets? Did you even care about them?
You see, and you'll read about this in my book. The New York Jets were a team that was formed in 1960, but were part of the old American Football League. the third iteration of the American Football League. The Jets were originally called the Titans of New York,
Right.
and they changed their name in 1963 to the New York Jets. But in that decade, the 1960s, the AFL had their league and played against the AFL teams, and the Giants never played against the Jets in those days. That did start to happen after 1970 when the two leagues merged. So in 1970, you've got the big merger of the AFL and the NFL. And so there was conference play, but the Giants and the Jets, in fact, don't play one another all that often because the Jets are in the AFC, the Giants are in the NFC. So, yes, there is rivalry by virtue of the fact that, they're both New York-based teams, but in fact, it's not a strong rivalry.
You know what I really enjoy? I remember I was on a cruise, I think like 10 years ago, and I think when football was a bit more hard hitting, now it's not. It's okay, but like I think it was like 2010 or something like that. I started to notice the rivalry between the Jets and the Giants in the preseason game. Have you ever seen those preseason games? They play them like
I actually haven't. You can tell me about those because
they
I haven't seen preseason games.
They play them like they're like the New York Giants versus New York Jets play the preseason game. I think it's like a ongoing thing now. They might have stopped it, but the years that I was watching it, they play it like it's a real game, like because they're both New York based and they're both really fired up and crazy to go and hit one another. I remember seeing.
They're trying to attract a fan base.
Yeah, it might have been the center for the Jets. I think it was Mangold had bleeding was all through his face mask and stuff like that.
Right.
But what are your thoughts now on the current Giant team? And do you think they got any chance to win a Super Bowl or anything in the next 5 years? Are they declining? Are they on the rise?
Well, I'd like to think they're on the rise. I do like Daniel Jones as a quarterback. I think he's not too bad, but look, I'm just hopeful because this was the first time we'd appeared in the playoffs for quite a number of years, and it was great that we beat Minnesota. Very happy about that. And
that was crazy, by the way. I thought Minnesota was gonna smoke you guys.
Yeah,
I thought that was an upset, an absolute upset.
Yeah, yep. Not many people predicted it in the tipping, that's for sure. But in answer to your question, cross fingers, here's hoping. You just can never be sure with players changing teams when their contracts come to an end. They don't necessarily re-sign and all that. It in a way, it's a great thing about NFL that you do get different teams bobbing up and not the same team winning each year, other than New England doing so very well for the 20 years from 2000 to 2019.
Transitioning to New England, I thank you guys because you beat them. You beat them, right? Did you beat them twice or once?
You
beat them twice, right?
Twice in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Very happy about that, Mark.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like for me, I understand Tom Brady's the best, right? And I get that 7 Super Bowls, but I just can't stand him. I'm just overseeing. Maybe it's because the guy being so successful and it's in your face all the time, and maybe the fact that he retired like 3 times now or twice now, whatever. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just like kind of sick of seeing Tom Brady. And of course, Tom Brady for us was in the way. Like he was in the way as a Patriots. Big Ben on our side for the Steelers. We had chances to go to Super Bowls or AFC championships, and we just couldn't get past Tom Brady. He beat our team 9-3. So it was really difficult to get past him. And to see you guys, the Giants, they were underdogs. I think you ended their season that was 19-0, right?
Yeah, they were undefeated going into that Super Bowl in 2008.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot. I'm pretty sure this is the sorry, apologies. I think it's David from the Facebook page on NFL. He's like one of the admins over there. He's a Patriot fan. And apologies if I forgot your first name wrong. I may have forgotten, but he's a Patriot fan. Massive Patriot fan. So
he's the head of the Facebook group. I see his comment. Mark, don't. Oh God, my PTSD. Sorry, David.
Yeah, it's David, right? I just kind of mind blank there. So he's a massive Patriot fan. I think he's even from New Zealand too. So But in saying that, like, this is what's so fun about the NFL, right?
Yeah,
How we have so many different fan bases. And like we were cheering on the Giants to win because we didn't want to see the Patriots go 19-0. They would never let it up. You know,
yeah,
the Miami
yeah,
Dolphins never let it up. That they went 16-0, right?
yeah.
Every
They were
year. They
17
they
and 0
never
that
let that
season.
up. So
Yeah.
we
Giants, in the early years of the NFL, before the merged league, the Giants appeared in a lot of championship games, 17 in all. But you know
really.
what? They only won 4 of those 17 and lost 13. So we've had a lot of hard times in our history.
Well, when did the Giants come into the league? They were one of the first teams, right?
1925.
1925. The Steelers were 1933. So you're along
Correct.
with the
Eagles.
Packers. Well, the
Now
Eagles.
The Packers were there from 1921, and the Arizona Cardinals, they were the first team, and the Chicago Bears and the Packers, they're the 3 oldest teams from the
Yeah, right.
1920-21 era, when the league for 2 years was called the American Professional Football Association, and then they
Has
changed it to the NFL in 1922.
has the Cardinals won anything ever? Have they ever won a championship? Like
They
that.
won a championship in 1947, and they won a championship in 1925, which is considered controversial.
Oh,
And they appeared in the 2009 Super Bowl, but a long time between drinks for the Cardinals.
why is it so that the Cardinals like that now are known as the Arizona Cardinals? Those
Correct, but they
right,
started off as the Chicago Cardinals.
right. So why
And then
was it contra
they became the St. Louis Cardinals in 1960. There's a great story about how all that came to pass. And then they became the Phoenix Cardinals in 1987 and renamed the Arizona Cardinals, still in the same area.
why was it controversy in that win in 1925, you said?
Oh, because in the early years between 1920 and 1932, teams could organize their own matches. The NFL
Oh,
did not coordinate the schedule, and you had teams playing teams outside the NFL and counting
right.
the wins and losses towards the standing. It was like the Wild West.
That's amazing. So that'd be like the Steelers playing the I don't know, one of the CFL teams, the
Yeah,
Tiger Cats or
correct,
something like that.
correct,
The Hamilton Tiger Cats playing them,
correct. Yeah,
saying, "Okay,
exactly. It was
we're gonna
auto-organized.
play them twice a year and
Yeah,
get our win."
and we'll count 2 wins, and then everybody else is not doing that. So it was, yeah, it was quite controversial. There were 2 years, 1921 and 25, which are pretty dubious. I mean, they recognize a champion, but you can make a case for, yeah, this doesn't sound quite legitimate.
That's what I love about this stuff, though, because in the Super Bowl era, there's still 12 teams that have not won one, and there's still 4 teams that have not been,
Yeah,
which is
I know.
the Lions, I think the Texans, Jaguars, and the Browns have not been to the Super Bowl in era. But I've got a
Yeah.
question here from George Tesson. I have no idea who these 2 guys are. Did Don get to see Chuck Bednarik's hit on Frank
Bednarek, yeah.
Gifford? Please explain. I have no idea what that even means.
Okay, you can actually look this up on YouTube. The answer is, George, I didn't see it live because I was only 7 or 8 years of age, but I've certainly seen it since. And being a Giants fan, yeah, Frank Gifford was one of our better players. And that hit by Bednarik put him out of the game for about 18 months. But he did come back after that and played a couple of seasons at the end of his career. It was a pretty hard hit, but it was a legitimate hit. He just, the guy was a bit unsighted to Gifford. It was a hard hit. I've seen Sam Huff, the Giants middle linebacker, commenting. He was watching this from the sidelines and said, "I thought Bednarik had killed Gifford."
Was that
But
a
it wasn't regarded, it wasn't given as an infraction. There was no 15-yard penalty. He
right?
just hit him hard and tackled him down and was seen raising his arms afterwards because Once that happened and Gifford fumbled the ball, Philadelphia recovered and had their lead protected and won a very important game.
Wow. Well, I just saw that on YouTube then, the beauty of the incident. He did like a clothesline, right?
Yeah,
Was
you
it
can look it up right away. Yeah.
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 Did a clothesline and went right to the ground, slammed to the ground.
Yeah, and
So
slammed him to the ground. But he wasn't penalized. And, at the time, that was a hard hit. And yeah, Gifford
and
was just
what
unlucky.
what year was that for football?
1960.
Right. Different times now, isn't it? You can't hit anything, you can't touch Tom Brady, you can't hit these
Yep.
players hard at all,
Very,
you
very
know?
different times. Very different times.
It's a bit like the safeties for the Steelers and the big hitters like Mean Joe for the Steelers. Everyone just went over each other's head.
Mm,
It's
mm.
exactly was just amazing. I have another question here. We've got a few good questions about. Oh, obviously the NFL history is amazing, and I appreciate you writing this book. Hopefully, I can get a copy too somehow. I've got one here from Arsenal DB says, Don, how great of a player was Johnny Unitas, and what great comparison for him to playing in today's game?
Well, Johnny Unitas was a fantastic player, and he played for close to 20 seasons.
Wow.
A bit like Brady in the
Mm.
sense of longevity for a quarterback, and maybe more impressive because, as you just pointed out, Mark, in those days the quarterback was not as well protected as today.
Right.
So he would have got clobbered a few more times, I'd say, than Brady. But he was tremendous. So he won 2 back-to-back NFL championships in 1958 and 59 with Baltimore. And he was instrumental in taking them from a pretty average team in the early to mid 50s to a championship team by the late 50s. He went to the 64 championship game, but the Browns beat up on them in the second half and won that one. The Johnny Unitas was the quarterback when they lost Super Bowl III to the Jets, however. And so that was most unfortunate from
Yeah.
Baltimore's perspective because they went in as 18-point favorites and lost the game.
18 points in front.
Yes. And that's
And
when Joe Namath made the famous prediction, I guarantee a Jets victory.
right.
But, Joe Namath made that prediction because he just got so fed up with the local reporters in Miami. I think the game was played that year, continually asking the question, how are you going to deal with Baltimore's fantastic defense? Because they
Right.
did have a good defense and they allowed the fewest number of points up to that time for a season ever. They had a bloody good defense.
Wow.
And he just got totally sick of hearing that all the time. And he said, I'll guarantee a Jets victory just to shut them up,
Yeah.
And it came true. It was amazing. So, but before we leave Johnny Unitas, the great Johnny Unitas did win a Super Bowl a couple of years later over the Cowboys in Super Bowl V. Baltimore
Right.
won
But
Super Bowl
and they
V.
were used to be called the Baltimore Colts, right?
Correct.
And they went on to move to Indy, right?
Correct.
Right. Okay.
In the middle of the night.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they got out of town before somebody said you can't leave. That's another great story. I'll cover off on it in my book. It's
so the league didn't want them to go or something like that. And they
well,
said, okay,
they were afraid that they'd be stopped from moving, so
Oh,
they shifted out in the middle of the night.
that's amazing. All right,
They left their cheerleading squad behind for 12 years until the Ravens came to town.
The old Ravens. I don't hate them much with the Bengals, but you can keep them in the book if you want to. So we have here, David says, Don, who would you choose for the all-time greatest QB for the Giants? Phil Simms or Eli Manning?
Well, what if I told you I also like Y.A. Tittle, who was the quarterback in the early 60s. He was an amazing quarterback, but he did only play for us for 3 years. But worth having a look at him. I would say Eli Manning, just because he beat New England in those 2 Super Bowls. Phil Simms won a Super Bowl in 1986-87 and was great. But the Giants were expected to beat Denver, I think, in that Super Bowl, whereas Eli Manning overcame the odds to beat the Pats.
Getting out of that tackle and that pass to David Tyree is one of the probably the best plays in Super Bowl history. Like, you got to put it
Yep.
up there.
Yep.
Of course, I think in my opinion, I am biased, but we have the Steelers' Debo Harrison running back for 99 yards, which is like,
Yep.
in my opinion, the greatest one that I have ever seen.
Yep.
That is fantastic. We have another question here from Steel Septicon says, what's your favorite Giant player of all time?
Ooh, you know what? I would stick with Y.A. Tittle. Do a bit of reading about this guy. He really was quite something. Most of his career was with the San Francisco 49ers. But when he came to the Giants in 1961, most pundits thought he was over the hill and washed up. And he took them to 3 straight championship games in his late 30s, 36, 37, 38, which was pretty darn impressive. Now, I know we didn't win those games, but he was fantastic. And a friend of mine posted a photograph of Y.A. Tittle on Facebook a few days ago. And I said, oh, Bruce, I remember this photo. It shows Y.A. Tittle kneeling in the end zone, bloodied. He'd been clobbered by somebody. And it's a really iconic photo, worth looking up. And I would say Y.A. Tittle. I call my pseudonym for footy tipping or for football fantasy is Y.A. Tittle's disciples. I'm one of those.
And I bet you a lot of people, even me, I didn't even know that player existed, right? So I bet you a lot of people in the group wouldn't even know who that is. I got another bit of a statement here from David. Says, Don, since you love NFL history, make sure you look up a guy, and I'll link you this guy's YouTube channel. It's called Jaguar Gator 9. He does do a lot of YouTube videos about the history, that kind of stuff. Breaks it down. So it's called Jaguar 9, I think, something like that.
Jaguar 9. Let me write that down. Jaguar.
He does a lot of in-depth coverage of just random things, like a bit like those stories there, this player from 1970 did this or something like that. He really starts to cover that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But we're going to transition to a little bit now, maybe talking a bit about I guess the information that you want from me from our Steelers. Do you have any Steelers questions for me or things you want to learn about our team that you have on your mind?
At this stage, no. I've compiled a reasonable amount of information on the Steelers. I might even email it to you, Mark, so you can have a look at it. I'd say no, because I'm not a Steelers fan. So
you should be. What do you?
Yeah. I can't tell you, and I think I have mentioned to you, Franco Harris's immaculate reception. That was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen on a football field, and have it indelibly planted in my brain from way back in 1972 when he made that catch. It was amazing.
Did you see it live on TV?
I didn't. I must confess, I was working that afternoon, but I got home and started watching the coverage on the TV news that night, and I've watched the replay many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've obviously never seen it live. I've been to Pittsburgh 3 times. I've been to the site where he caught the football. Now with his passing last year was super saddening, and it was like the worst part about it all. It was 2 days before, and it's like they were meant to be celebrating the play and his football, and then it turned him from celebrating football to celebrating his life. It was a really weird, I know death is a part of life and stuff like that, but it was a really weird thing to go through. That 2 days before it, everyone's so hyped about the game, so happy to hopefully see him in the stadium holding his jersey up, and then obviously he passed away. And I don't even still know what happened. Maybe just things happen. When you know what, to a certain degree, we don't need to know why he passed away. To be honest, that's his family, that's with the organization. It's just what happened. But that play is the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? That was run down to the end zone. And they all still joke about it today. Did he catch it? Didn't he catch it? We don't know, right? But
Now he caught it. The
hey,
question was, did it hit the Oakland player first or did it hit the Pittsburgh guy first? That's what they don't know. There's no dispute that he caught it before it hit the ground.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I still think in the vision, it could have hit the turf and he could have pushed it down and picked it
Nah,
up.
nah, 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 nah. It didn't happen.
No.
Nah, nah,
Well,
nah.
anyways, it doesn't matter if what anyone thinks. It's in the history books as a TD, and they went on to the playoffs and how that went, right? But it was a crazy time for Steelers fans for all the bad times of something really successful, and that started the run of the four
Correct.
Super Bowls, right? So it
That
started
was
like
the first. That was the first playoff game you ever won,
yeah,
and
off
it
that,
was the first touchdown you ever scored in the playoffs.
off
Double
that, right?
whammy.
Yeah, off that. So it's like that started something, and now we have six, and we haven't got one for a long time, right? But yeah, that when I went to Pittsburgh, I went to and if you ever get to go there, have you been in the States
I haven't
and
been to Pittsburgh. No,
haven't been to
no.
Pittsburgh? When I was there, there's a place called the Heinz History Center Museum. It's got everything, but pretty much one of their levels is dedicated to like sports, right? So everything sports from Penguins to Steelers to the
Yep.
Pirates to whoever,
Pirates,
right?
baseball.
Everything
Yep,
up there. And
yep,
when you walk into this part, you walk into the NFL bit or Steelers bit, and the first thing you see is a video replaying the Franco Harris catch for about a minute or 2 minutes in replay over and over and over. And
yep,
I stood there and watched it like three
yeah,
times. I was like, "This is
yeah,
amazing,
yeah,
right?" It
yeah.
gets you set up to go and tour the rest of the center, and it's like that's even just seeing that you're like, "Holy smokes!" Like this happened. Like I didn't see it live, and I've actually been to the site. I've been to the stadium. I've been to where Three Rivers was.
Yep.
In the airport, I've walked past the statue. I didn't at the time didn't think about it. I was like trying to get to my taxi, trying to get to my Uber or whatever I had.
You
I wasn't.
didn't
I was
think about it. Wow.
no, no. It was like 9 o'clock at night. I didn't want to miss my taxi. Like I
Yeah, fair
didn't.
enough.
Also, too, it was 2015, 2016, and I'm not a selfie guy. I'll be honest. I'm not about there to go and like, oh, look me get a selfie with Franco. I probably
Yep,
would now if I go back and have a bit of time. But at the
yep,
time when I got off the plane from New York to Pittsburgh, it was like 9:30 or 10 o'clock. I was like, I can't stuff around. I got to get my bag. I got to get my stuff, and I got to go and get in the car and then get to my hotel. I didn't even, and I think I might even walk past it. I'm not even sure. So I've actually never. I've been to Pittsburgh Airport twice, and I've never seen that statue of Franco. I've seen the other ones at the Heinz History Museum, and I've seen all the other stuff. But yeah, he was such a vital part and a really good guy off the field too.
yep.
You know
He
what I
was.
mean? Like a really good guy in the community. So it was super saddening to see that happen.
Mm,
Like, and I was just like a bit like, did that really happen? Did I
yeah.
really hear the news break 2 days
Yeah,
before? I'm like,
it was amazing that it happened when it did. Another thing, and if you haven't seen this, you can look it up. I had a look at an interview with Joe Green, another key member of the Steelers from that era, who was interviewed and spoken about 10 years ago, I think it was, about what his thoughts were on the Immaculate Reception and how he went running down the sideline followed Franco into the end zone, only about 5 or 10 yards behind him.
bro.
That interview goes for about 5 minutes. Look it up on YouTube; you can find it. It's worth seeing
Yeah,
from a
that's
Steelers
something I
perspective.
don't do. I don't do overly enough. I do, look up old videos here and that, but I always feel to a certain degree, this kind of sounds kind of funny. Like I know Joe Green and all these guys are absolute legends. I get that, I respect them, but there's no like connection there. Like to me, the connection is like with Troy, Troy Polamalu, Harrison,
Yeah,
Debo,
sure,
Big Ben,
because
because
they're current.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's what I watched, right? Like
that's what
watch
you know.
growing up watching Troy Polamalu is probably one of the best safeties, if not top five, in the NFL, maybe ever. The way that he played the game was just crazy. Like he would jump the line and jump over the center
Yeah,
as they snap the ball and get a tackle. There's
yeah,
one play he runs through the Bengals line and he tackles Carson Palmer before even Palmer's handing the football off. Like those things, I'm like, holy dooly.
yeah.
But I go back and watch
Sure.
the highlights of Franco or Rocky Blyer or Rod Woodson, and I haven't
Yeah,
got that personal connection. Is there any Steelers, Steelers player that you would say that's outstanding for our organization?
Well, you're talking about the current crop of players, or the last 20 years at least. And whereas, because I'm a different generation, I'm thinking about players like Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Joe Green, Rocky Blyer. Yeah, you've named a few of them just now. They were the ones when you guys were winning Super Bowls back in the 70s, mid 70s to late 70s, that stood out for the team. So for me, those are the guys. But I fully understand for the younger generations, it's Troy and Ben and the current crop, of course.
Yeah, well,
Fully understand that.
we have Gene Smith. He says Jack Lambert slamming a guy down saying stay down. Like that kind of stuff's cool, isn't it? You
Right.
know,
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
like don't mess with me attitude. You know,
Exactly.
we had that with James Debo Harris. Like he's one of my favorite players. Like I've got his jersey. He's obviously in my YouTube logo there. Like he is like the one of the truest Steelers I think I've ever seen play the football game, because he would just go into mode of like, don't mess with me.
Yep.
And there was one game he versed the Ravens. He got like three sacks, 2 turnovers. He got an interception. He got a fumble. He got this kind of stuff. It's like absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. And okay. Here's a question that's been going around the NFL. So Michael Malley brings up, Don, we were games as rigged back in the day as they are now. Do you think
Oh,
there's a bit of bias, or is there any riggery in NFL?
oh gosh. Being an honest John myself, I would like to think the games aren't rigged. But yeah, I hear these rumors sometimes too. Um, I would hope not.
Mm.
I would say no. But
I hope, yeah, I hope so too. I believe there is some element of a narrative to the game, to the league. I think the league is too big, in my opinion, to let it just run its course. You do see the refs do get involved quite a bit in certain circumstances, like even going back to, I think it was the Rams game when that receiver got tackled by, can't remember who the other team they were versing, but the Rams, one of the players tackled the receiver right out of bounds. There was no flag, and I
yeah,
think it stuffed them up. I would say there's an element to it because it's a big business. But I'm
yeah,
like you, I hope it. But I kind of see it now like as entertainment, or cheer my team on and stuff like that. And I really enjoy like what the league has done anyway. You know what I mean? If it's
yeah,
not 100% like okay, true for or whatnot, I'm kind of like just okay with it now. I enjoy all the history, even the history that we've talked about, right? And I
yeah,
think you can't rig everything, right? You that tackle you talked about, that guy knocking someone out. That's not in the script or whatever it is. It's just like
no,
they're going out there to play hard football. I
yeah,
would just hope that both teams can play as hard as they can to try and win games. And then if the refs do get involved, that sucks. Like that doesn't. I'm not a big fan of that. But I can
yeah,
see how they would try and maybe give leverage to Mahomes to get to Super Bowls and give him a bit extra help, because obviously he's a superstar. You
yeah.
know what I
And,
mean?
and
But
people want to see the best players going around.
yeah, exactly. But but I still like seeing the underdog, and I actually think that the Eagles. I know you're not an Eagles fan, right? You can't be.
I'm a Giants fan, so no.
No, but do you like them, or do you hate them? How I hate the
Uh,
Bengals, or
yeah, not a look. The Giants and Eagles were not good at the same time very often, so it wasn't. Even though we've got a strong rivalry, but the teams 1960 and 61, yep, we were good those 2 years. Both teams were good, but as a general rule, come playoff time in the last 50 years, yeah, we've only played them like twice. This was only the second time. So they're not a factor from that perspective, from my point of
Mm.
view.
Yeah, but like, can you cheer on your division rival to win a
I
Super
I
Bowl?
would, yeah, oh, absolutely. I
Really?
like to see the NFC teams
Oh
win.
no, Don.
In the NFC, I like to see the NFC teams win because I was always a National Football League supporter. And back in the late
Fair enough.
60s, we used to poo-poo the American Football League.
Oh, okay. Right.
Okay, so American Football League was considered second rate, and then everybody, myself included, got our comeuppance when the Jets won Super Bowl III and Kansas City won Super Bowl IV.
Right.
Eat humble pie. They're not as bad as we think.
Maybe it's just me that I could never cheer the Bengals on to win anything, and I mean anything. So if I
Okay.
saw the Bengals in Super Bowl, I got to cheer whoever's versing them.
Against
I,
them.
I
Against
never
them.
want to see the Ravens or the Browns. They're never going to get there. You could in your book writing about the Browns, you could have like that. He could have just have Juju's quote: "Browns is the Browns." That's all you need. Is like one sentence in your book.
But Mark, you see, you don't understand the history of the Browns. The Browns were the most successful team in the NFL back in the
No,
1950s,
I
bar
remember.
none.
I'm just poking a bit of fun. I remember that they had well, obviously the running back Jim Brown. They won a lot of championships back in the day. But I'm
Yeah,
just like, right
I
now,
know.
the
I know.
last 20 or 30 years consistently shoot themselves in the foot with
Oh
no matter
God,
what,
yeah,
like
they're
what
shocking.
the
They're shocking.
quarterbacks. They have a good running back now, Nick Chubb. They fire coaches. They get rid of they
Yeah,
get rid of pretty much everyone. It's like every
yeah.
year they build them up, and you got to feel bad, like, or not bad. We got to feel a bit sorry for the Browns fans who do stick it out, who are like me being a Steelers fan for 20 something years, and they just
Mm.
haven't won anything over the last what? When's the last time they won a playoff game? 1999 or 1980, 19
Sorry,
something like
which team?
the Browns. When's the last time they won a playoff game?
Oh God.
Oh no, no, but sorry, they beat us. They beat us, of course. Before that, it was like 30 years, right?
1994, I think.
Yeah, and they
One,
obviously they beat
they might have won one then when Bill Belichick was coaching them.
right. Yeah, and they beat us too. They beat us a few years ago when Big Ben hiked the football, or the football was hiked all the way back to the end zone. I got a
Right.
few questions though. People are loving the questions and loving the history too. So this is my mate Matty Perro, who I work with on Behind this Little Curtain as well. And I'm also we're creating another YouTube channel shortly called Steelers Touch and Under. So Matty's got a question. He says, have caught parts of the interview, Don. I've watched lots of documentaries on the merger. Do you
Yep.
think there are too many teams in the NFL now, or can it sustain more teams? What do you think?
I'd I'd be reluctant to expand it much more. There are a couple of places like St. Louis, for instance, which doesn't have a team these days, but did for many years, that would be able to support a team. But I understand the reluctance of the team owners to make it too big. They've been sitting at 32 teams since 2002, so there's been no additional teams come into it in the last 20 years. They might be able to get a few more teams, but maybe only 3 or 4, bring it up to 36. But I'm happy with 32. What
Mm,
staggered me, just as a brief aside, is that the next FIFA World Cup, they're going from 32 teams to 48 teams. What?
really?
What?
Wow,
What is that all about? But I mean, that's another story. That
that's crazy.
sounds
So you
crazy
so
to
you think
me.
they might add 34 teams? I wouldn't even know where the teams would come from. What cities do you think would.
Well, St. Louis could easily support one. Um, you could probably put a team back in San Diego. They had the Chargers there for all those years. Los Angeles is so big.
Mhm.
Probably put a separate team there. There has been talk 20 odd years ago of locating a team in my hometown of Toronto. Again, a big enough market that people would go to the games, but it would probably kill off the Canadian Football League. So I think that's
Right.
why that's not been followed through on. Um, yeah, look, 34 teams now. Get a number that's divisible. 36 might be better, but yeah, they move slowly, because you've
Yeah.
got to remember that back in 1970, at the time of the merger, there were 26 teams then. And they agreed to add a couple of more teams. That was part of the deal, to put it up to 28. But that didn't happen until 1976. Took 6 years for that to happen, and Tampa Bay and Seattle came in, right?
Okay.
And then in the 1990s, you've got Jacksonville and Carolina. Then Cleveland Browns lost their team, go down. We've got a new team in Baltimore. So it's been gradual to
Mm.
build it up to 32 since 1970. It took 32 years to go from to 26 teams to 32 teams, and now we've sat tight for the last 20 years. We could probably expand a bit more. There's a big population in the U.S. Big
And if it
population.
goes from 32 to 34 or 36, it'll be even harder to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right.
I got another question here from Are You the Goat says, are there any stadiums that are cursed? Uh,
Oh, you might be better qualified to ask that. I don't know. I haven't looked into that quite so closely
I
as
guess it
yet. I
can go
don't know.
two ways with that. Do you mean does the curse mean as in football quality, or there's the team can't win there, or does it mean that like it's really haunted or something like that?
Yeah,
The only thing I can really think of is like in this kind of terminology is that was the Chicago Cubs, I believe, they were cursed. Their
at
team for like
Wrigley Field.
100, yeah, for
Yeah,
100 years, right? Was 100 years or something like that? You
100,
know?
108 years before they won another World Series.
Yeah, and wasn't that did you ever see that documentary on that guy, the fan who caught the baseball?
Yes, yes,
Isn't
it
isn't
did.
that like a very harrowing story how society turned on him completely? Like
Yeah, correct.
they used him as the scapegoat, and they
Yeah,
yelled threats, death threats as he walked
yeah.
out, and that guy couldn't face the public for many years, not even sure about
No,
now. I think he's slowly getting out of it because he
yeah,
reached out his hand, he got involved, and
yeah.
everything turned on that fella, didn't he? Like they were
Correct.
going to win the World Series, and then it was all because they stuffed up the next
They
2
hadn't
games.
even qualified for the World Series.
Oh,
That was
wasn't a
the point.
qualifier.
That was only
Oh,
the National League Championship Series.
but they were in front, right? They were in front by a few games or something
Oh,
like
they
that.
were, but then they collapsed. They lost the
Yeah,
game
but
8-4 or something in
that's
the late
what I
innings.
find funny about it is it wasn't just that one catch stuffed everything up. It was like the
Yeah,
trickle down effect, and he wore all the blame. He
yeah,
wore every.
correct.
I think it was something Bartman. I think his name was.
Steve Bartman.
Yeah, he wore the
Steve
whole
Bartman.
blame, and there was a
Yeah,
whole docu-series on it, and people were yelling and throwing stuff at him, and then the media got around it, and then pretty much the organization, all these guys were like, you know what, it was his fault.
yeah.
Like that to me is like I couldn't imagine
That's
being that guy at
taking
the game.
things a little bit too seriously.
Yeah, that was like they were talking about like yeah, he was the real scapegoat. Like put all the energy to him, and he was the guy. Okay, we lost, but we're gonna blame this guy.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah.
So no, there's no rule anything like that with the NFL in stadiums because I don't know either, to be honest.
No, I'm not aware.
All right. Hey, there's a lot of comments going on here. Any more questions too, guys? Let me know. We will talk about some other things for Don. Is there anything like in today's NFL? What really stands out for you? What's the favorite thing you like to watch on the football field? Like player
Oh,
what?
look, I'm a great Aaron Rodgers fan. I just think as a quarterback, he is so exciting to watch. But there are other great quarterbacks. I mean, Ben's retirement recently, he was great to watch too. I loved watching Ben
Mm.
Roethlisberger. Um, a good quarterback just makes the game so exciting, and Green Bay have had a few of those over the years, and yeah, I love watching Rodgers play, and I know he's getting to the end of his career, and obviously he didn't have a good season this year, blah blah blah. But man, I think he won the previous two NFL MVP awards, and his passer rating still fantastic. He hardly throws any interceptions, so yeah, give me a good offensive game any day. Love it, love it.
He was just and Greg Rosenthal is one of the guys with the NFL. He was rated number 6 on the NFL list or NFL Super Bowl quarterback list. And actually they left out Big Ben and they left out Terry Bradshaw. Or he left out,
Oh, did
right?
they? Okay.
So they put Rodgers in, or he put Rodgers in for the. Now this was top 10 list for Super Bowl quarterbacks. So it wasn't actual quarterbacks for the league. It was like their performances in Super Bowl. But
Right.
Terry Bradshaw won 4 and he was snubbed, and Big Ben won 2 and he was snubbed.
Yeah.
I'm not a real big fan of Rodgers, to be honest. I just don't like his. I go more to like his personal and the feelings. I just
Yep.
think the guy's full of like machismo and ego, and I just think I just
Yep.
can't. But also, my mate Matty has told me a few times if Rodgers was the Steelers quarterback, you'd love him. I bloody would. I probably would. I'd
Yeah,
have
you
number
would.
12 jersey. I
You
would love him, right? But I just know because he beat us, of course, in Super Bowl 45. I'm just not
Yep.
a big fan. I'm not a big fan of like the hype around every year that he's like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to go. I'm not too
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
I
yeah.
might go here, here, here. And then he signs with the Green Bay anyway. It
Yeah,
happens
that's
every
right.
single year.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
kind of roll off that, Gene's got the similar question. What is the best thing about the NFL, not money related, and the worst thing about the NFL, not money related?
John Olerud, my gosh, John Olerud is the former top hitter for the Toronto Blue Jays,
Right. That-
1993. The best and the worst thing about the NFL, oh, um, that's a big call. You know, I'm currently looking at how the league fought its way through the dark days when college football was king and way more popular, and how the NFL managed to overcome those harder times with a lot of team owners, including Pittsburgh, Art Rooney losing a lot of money, how they managed to overcome that and build it up to be the popular game that it is today. And I think that's a great story. That's
Mm.
fantastic. The worst thing, yeah, oh,
You could say
probably,
TikToks.
yeah. The worst thing is probably the injuries.
Oh, okay.
It's sickening to see some of these injuries that do occur. It's a tough game, and clash of helmets and concussions and everything. And I think it's really poor that the NFL, being such a powerful and significant sports league, really hasn't had a proper concussion policy. That they're it's sort of making it on the run early this
Yeah,
season
I was gonna say that. It's like with the
to, and that but they've got to get with it. They've got to get up to date here and get one, because these players, the hits are so hard that's a real problem. So that's probably the worst thing from my perspective.
Yeah, we even had a former Steeler, which I think he's absolutely gone crazy yesterday in the news. Antonio Brown. I don't know if you saw this one with a bit of news came out that now Antonio Brown is claiming that James Debo Harrison caused his concussion for CTE and his problems. So he came out on Instagram. I actually truly believe that Antonio Brown does need help. I don't think money or fame is any different from me needing, if I was in the same way,
Yep.
needing help. I think Antonio Brown is filled with a bunch of hype men around him. A lot of guys that are saying he's the best, you're the best. We love you, dude. You're doing really good things. That's
Yeah.
fire, whatever. And I think he's got that much fame and money around him. And he does. And I actually think I'm not saying that like okay, go and arrest him and get him in a straitjacket, but he
Yeah.
does need some form of help. If that was me running outside doing what he was doing, like the hotel incidents, the incidents, so many incidents on YouTube I can't even really talk about that involve that kind of stuff in the bedroom, which is crazy that he's filming and just the things that he's done to his wife. And it's just like, dude, what is he like? This guy is mad. Like he's
Yeah.
lost the plot completely.
Mhm.
Antonio Brown was one of my favorite players, one of Steel Nation's favorite players, and now he's just a celebrity that this goes off the rocker. And
Yeah.
he called out James Debo Harrison and said, "You're the reason why you gave me CTE." And like, it's
Right.
like at this
Mm.
point, it's like this guy I fear that something's going to happen where we've seen in I don't know, I can't remember what player it was, but there was some player went down to the Chiefs and I think he shot himself in front of the stadium like years ago.
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
I could fear something like that happening with Antonio Brown because he's lost it. He is not
Yeah.
any form of a human. He just I don't know what it is. It's fantasy land.
Yeah.
Got another question from Maddie, and we'll start to wrap it up soon. And I really do appreciate your time and also diving into the history was really fun today. Maddie says he's thanks for answering the questions, Dom. Do you think there can be a GOAT in the NFL, or should it be more like eras like the NBA is often viewed for the same question, e.g., Wilt, West, Jordan, and Kobe? Do we need to have a GOAT in the NFL?
No, I'd say it's very much about eras. Things have changed dramatically over the years. 100 years is a long time for the development of football. Um, Definitely eras. You got the early years of the NFL. In those days, as I mentioned earlier, the umpires didn't have the whistle in their mouth all the time, ready to throw flags and blow the whistle and call an infraction. There was far less of that. It was a different game. I'll just give you a quick example. There's a very famous quarterback for the Washington Commanders, who, of course, were known as the Redskins for all those years, named Sammy Baugh. Now, he was a tremendous quarterback. He's, in my opinion, the Commanders' best quarterback in those 100 years. No one else comes close. But he was also a fantastic punter. And as a surprise tactic, he would sometimes punt the ball like on second or third down just to pin the opposition deep in their own territory. Different era, different game.
So he would call his own shots as the QB and change it up to a punt and be like, you know what, I'm going to put you back there.
And he didn't necessarily wait until fourth down.
That's amazing. You'd never see that today. You'd never, ever see that.
Totally unheard of today. Totally unheard. Never would happen.
I think Big Ben's done a pooch punt here and there. I think Brady's done a punt here and there, but that's like almost, it's kind of going to happen, but not by surprise on second down. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. That's cool.
He apparently did this in the 1942 NFL championship game against the Bears.
Right.
I haven't seen highlights. I've just read about it.
That's cool. We've got another question here too. This is the one about NFL having, you're talking about overtime. Why can't the NFL have a thing and add a thing where the overtime, instead of a tie, they add something like the NHL do with shootouts? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah.
Maybe you do play-by-play to get points. I think the USFL are doing it where if they go to overtime, it's like best out of 3. You got to score 2 to win, and you know what I mean? Would they ever add that in?
Oh, gosh, I've never even contemplated that. I know there's not that many games that after overtime still end up in a tie. I guess it's pretty infrequent. So I don't see that the NFL, I mean, the games are so brutal. So they're so physical. How much time are you going to add on?
I think as well, the NFL, the Players Association, who look after the health of the players, they will be like, well, if we're playing overtime, we need to get paid for that, right?
Yeah,
that's what they would say. So, and kind of the same thing. Should the NFL get rid of ties? Do they? And if they do get rid of ties, that's the same thing. The players then have to play longer for more injuries, and we saw that with TJ Watt this year in the first game. That game went to overtime and he got injured in the last 2 minutes with his chest because everything was happening. So I don't know if they should get rid of ties. I don't know what the good agreement is to do. Do you play the game until it runs out and then see who wins? But at the end of the day, I think if the players play longer and longer and longer, there are going to be more injuries happening. You saw what happened with the 49ers game. The 49ers lost 3 quarterbacks or 2 quarterbacks, and they were down to their McCaffrey. If no one can win the game, then it's just going to force players to get injured and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So.
Personally, I think no, they don't get rid of ties because there's very few ties anyway. I can tell you a quick story about that too. Ties were never recognized in the standings until 1973. There were lots of drawn games in the first 50 years of the NFL, and ties were just simply not recognized.
What just didn't count?
Overtime. They didn't have overtime in those days, and ties weren't recognized.
That sounds like the AFL game that was the grand final when no one knew what to do. And after a few years ago when it was a tie, and they're like, "Well, what do we do now?" And they're like, "We come back next week. Come back next week."
Yeah. But if that happens again, they're going to play extra time.
That's crazy. All right, guys, we might finish it there, Don. I thank you for coming on the podcast today. That was really fun. I didn't know what direction.
Thanks very much, Mark, for having me on, and really enjoyed the questions from everybody out there. Thanks for listening.
We might have to do it again sometime. Maybe when's your book going to be ready?
$1 million question, but reading a book sometimes takes a long time, but writing a book, it's a long haul. I have done a lot of research already, and hoping within the next 12 to 18 months, I'll have this thing finalized.
Yeah, no, it's
And
really
I will
cool,
let
man.
all of you know, and yeah, would be happy to talk to you, maybe before the season starts
Yeah,
next year, 2023 season.
it's really cool going to find out where that podcast starts and then going through all the different journeys and like figuring out the NFL history and going back to like where the Cardinals were and stuff like that. It's a
Yep.
lot of fun. That's why I like the NFL. There's so much involved in it, not just about the 32 teams now, where it goes all the way back to, like you said, where the Browns were relevant back in the day.
Yep.
Like you said, that the game that the Cardinals were playing, that one got me. The Cardinals were playing inferior opponents to get better standings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff. So everyone's saying thank you, Jed. Also, thank you, Dom, for coming on. Much appreciated. George, thank you. And we have one last question. Do you follow the NHL or not?
Oh
Not
yeah, yeah. I'm a long-suffering Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Oh my gosh, Boston Bruins is the best team at the moment.
right, right. You
Gene.
know what I find funny with because when I was living in Canada, right, they always told me that the Maple Leafs started off strong, but then ended really poorly every year. Is that correct?
Uh, I no, we've been crap since the mid '60s. The last championship for us was 1967. So
Wow.
we're
Wow.
like the St. Kilda.
Really
Until
good.
recently, the Melbourne Football Club. They won a couple of years ago to break their curse. But Philadelphia Eagles, after all those years of not winning a championship, finally won a Super Bowl. Toronto Maple Leafs still waiting.
1967. That's
Yeah, a
crazy.
long time. It's a long time.
You got a chance this year or no?
Uh, we're not a bad team, but
Yeah.
and things can happen in the playoffs. But we've just lost a game to Boston, who are in the same division, who are better than us a couple of days ago. So, yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. We get to the playoffs in recent years, and we lose in the first round
That's
every time.
that's what I've been hearing the last
Yeah,
notion, right? You get there, all the hype's built up, and then you lose in that's game 7 or whatever it is, that first round you're done. So that's what I've been hearing,
yeah.
Anyways,
Can
thank you, Don,
can
mate.
I ask one little question, and
Yeah,
I'll
go
pose
for it. Yeah.
it to your listeners because I know not everybody is a Steelers fan necessarily. One of the things I'm looking for, which Mark mentioned earlier, is a photograph of the different stadiums, as many as I can get, and a bit of an impression of those stadiums. Yep, that's great. The other thing I'm interested to get is from an Australian's perspective, how did you come to follow the team you follow?
Oh,
So I
okay.
just heard recently on ABC Radio, for instance, a couple of mornings ago, Charlie Pickering, who's doing the radio broadcast on a Friday morning down here on ABC in Melbourne, he's a Buffalo Bills fan. He's also quite the media personality down
Mhm.
here in Victoria. He's got his the weekly every Wednesday night. I'm thinking I'm going to contact him because we're regular ABC listeners. Hey, Charlie, how did you come to follow the Bills? You know,
I wonder if he's a Bills fan in the last few years or he's a Bills fan, for the last 30 years. I don't know, right?
that's what I'm interested to find out.
Because
And that's where it's interesting. How did
yeah,
people come to follow the team they follow? In my case, I followed my older brother's lead. Mark, you
yeah.
can tell me how come you followed the Steelers? How did that come
Well,
about?
for me, I didn't even really know about the 4 Super Bowls in the '70s. So I started watching football in, I think, around, when I started watching football was around the 1998, something like that, or 2000s, right?
Yeah,
All the movies came out, like Remember the Titans, The Little Giants. That was a good movie. I could have been a Giants fan if I
yeah,
followed it, because The Little Giants came out. That was the kid movie. There was The Replacements. All these kind of movies came out. Friday Night Lights. And that intrigued me. That like the Disney aspect of football really intrigued me. Like, oh, what is this game? And I was like, what, 15 or maybe 12 years old or whatever, or 11 years old.
yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then even when I was even more littler too, I was playing the Madden games back in the day on Madden 96 on Sega. And then, of
Right.
course, the PS1. That intrigued me too. Like the John Madden football, the whistle, you throw the football up, and it was like the 2-bit or 8-bit, like, screen. And like it was Cowboys versus Giants and those kind of things were like, oh, this game's pretty fun, right? All
Yeah.
those kind of things happened. And then I kind of came to like a conclusion around about, I think it was 2002 or 2003, where another Madden game came out. And I was like, you know what? I need to choose a team. I
Yeah.
need to choose a team. I didn't know what I had to. I know I had to because I actually a lot of fans will hate me, but me and my mate Matty Peverill, we follow the Manly Sea Eagles, right? And everyone hates the Manly Sea Eagles, but I
Yeah.
follow them because my parents do. But with the NFL, I was the only one of my family who watched it or was like interested in it, and I was like, I need to pick a team. And the only
Yeah.
reason why I picked the Steelers was because of the colors. Was because at
Right.
the time I thought it was black and yellow, and of course it is black and gold. And I will fight anyone on that debate. It is actually black and gold. It goes back to the linear history of William Pitt, and he was chosen. The city was named after him, and the
Yeah.
flag is represented by his crest, which is black and gold coins. So anyone who says a black and yellow, I'm sorry, you're wrong because it goes back to 1816. It goes all the way back to 1816. It's black and gold. It is not black and yellow. So
Yeah.
I chose a team based off the colors alone. And then when you choose your team, you get that like identity, that feeling of like, oh, I like this team. You know what I mean? I'm starting to know the players. I watched when it was like Randall L, Tommy Maddox,
Yeah.
Amos Zero Way. Like I was using him in the game as well. So I was using the Madden game. I was like, oh, this is pretty fun. I'm using my
Yeah.
players. Then I would watch every Monday morning if I get a chance on Fox, like at 5 a.m. or 7 a.m. when I was a kid, wake up and I'd see my team. I didn't really become a huge fan like I am now to about 2007. Even before with the Super Bowl 40 with the
Yeah.
Bucs, I was like, oh, that's my team. And oh, they like, oh, that's so good. They won the Super Bowl. But
Yeah.
now, if I see him win, I'm gonna probably jump through the roof or through a table, right? I am crazy about him. So when it was Super Bowl 40, I was like, oh, that's my team. That's Big Ben. He's the new rookie. He's cool. All right. I was still learning the game. I didn't really
Yeah. Yeah.
understand the game being
Yeah.
15 years old. So it all comes back to the colors. And then once you identify that's your team, you stick with it. Don't change. You
Yeah.
stick with
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
then I started learning the history. I put in the old DVD tapes of Bill Cowher, Chuck Knowles. You start to you just grab all the content you can. Now on
Sure.
the internet, there's too much content. But back in the day, I would buy magazines, I'd buy DVDs, I'd buy games. I
Yeah.
would, try and tape on the VCR. A program would come on for half an hour talking about the Steelers. I'd tape that, you know what I mean, and watch that. So yeah, it goes all the way back to about 2001, which was about that time. I even
Yeah.
remember going up to Queensland with my parents, and I read in the newspaper that the Patriots had beaten, I think, the Eagles in Super Bowl 2001 or something like that, around that time.
The Rams. The Rams.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
first time they
yeah,
won was over
yeah.
the
I
Rams.
remember, like, I was a fan of the game, but I didn't watch it because I was young and it was, I don't know, but I've read in the paper. So it goes all
Yeah.
the way back there, and Tommy Maddox and yeah, Bettis, and then James Farrier and all these dudes,
Yeah.
and that's just included now learning the game every year, and every year you follow it, you learn more, and you get more passionate about it. So to
You
me, it's
do.
just based off
So
the color,
it's all about the colors, though. So,
pretty
and
much.
that's a reason for a lot of people. Why did they barrack for a team? Oh, I like their colors. Yeah, that's not unusual at
And you
all.
can't go past it. Like it is a fantastic. It's black and
Yeah.
gold. It's an
Yeah.
easy on the eyes kind of color. All right, let's get out
Well,
of here.
thanks for having me on, guys,
Yeah,
and I'll be in touch.
yeah, bloody oath. All right, thanks, guys, checking out Still in Australia, and thank you, Don. Man, that was a great interview. Stick around for 1 minute, Don.
Sure.
In the background.
Yep.
And all right, guys, thank you for checking out Still in Australia. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go.
Here we go, Steelers! Here we go! Coach